And in this section, we'll do a bit of work with the ball or balls. If you have your tennis ball or your massage ball, toy ball, miracle balls, anything like that can be used. Then take, if you've got two, you can use two. If you've got one, you can use one. If you don't have any, you can do the practice without as well, no problem. So coming to semi-supine, lying down with your knees bent, bending your knees, and then lifting up into a little bridge to pop either a ball underneath each buttock in a fairly symmetrical position, or you can start with a ball just under the right side. And you can have a little play around with where you want it. So the glutes, the gluteus muscles here, and the piriformis, which is a deep buttock muscle, they can be quite tight, especially if there's been some lower back issues or sciatica, slip disc. And also for some of us, this is where we hold tension. Some people hold it in their shoulders, some people hold it in their piriformis. You might not know, and if you do know, you might not know why, and that's all okay. This is helpful for anybody that has buttock muscles. So see how it works for you. And yeah, so it might be quite interesting to be close to your sitting bone, that little protruding bone at the top of the back of your thigh. If that feels sore, then go for a fleshier area or more to the outside. So some of us feel tension here on the outside of the hip. So have a play around, and there'll be invitations to move the ball to different spots. And if this is helpful for you, you can revisit and experiment with different areas. So once you've placed the ball or both balls under you, inviting you to breathe out fully and to let go of the weight of the pelvis onto the ball or balls, or directly to the floor. Notice the position of your shoulders and your feet. So what is the best way to relax here? It might again help to have your hands on your belly or your hip crease area to encourage the front of the body to let go too. So these muscles here, the hip flexors, the psoas being one of them, can get quite tight, short from walking and lifting our legs and sitting with hip flexion. So letting that soften, sense of letting it all drop to the ground. And then letting your right leg straighten out, the leg where you've got the ball. Again, breathing out, letting that go. And then rolling the leg inwards and outwards. Movement coming from the hip. And then letting the leg relax again. Breathing out fully. And then sliding the heel back and bringing the knee above the hip with the knee at a right angle. And here might be a point where you want to actually change the position of the ball because the weight distribution through the hip is quite different. So if it's uncomfortable, then move or remove the ball. And keeping the pelvis as steady as you can, still heavy on the ball or on the floor. And then letting your knee move from side to side, so your lower leg is just following. If it feels a little intense, you could guide with your hand. A bit of support maybe from your hand. If you leave your arm and hand out of the equation, you'll be using your thigh muscles a bit more. Subtle strengthening, subtle control. It's a fairly gentle dance with gravity. And then coming back to the knee being above the hip. And see how it is to straighten your leg for a moment. Again, if you have a massage ball there, it might feel quite different from a normal upward leg stretch. So see how that feels. You can bend and straighten a couple of times. And then if it's okay to keep the leg raised, you can bend it more, by the way. And again, you could remove or move the ball. If it feels okay, you can point the toes away from you and then flex the foot in towards you a few times. And then hug the knee in towards the chest. And then popping the foot back down. And if you've only got one ball, remove it. You can notice the difference between both sides. And then move it to the other buttock. If you've got both balls, you can stay as you are. Maybe move them to a slightly different spot. If you've got a ball underneath both buttocks, move them slightly down or outward or whatever. So you're getting into a little bit of a different area. And again, taking a moment to breathe out fully. Maybe again, shifting other parts of your body as the body begins to release. You know, I often notice it's almost like my back is getting bigger and my shoulders wider, and I can move my head up a little bit more. So I'm spreading out onto the floor. And straightening the left leg, the other leg. If you started on the other side, it's fine. Encourage your leg to let go and relax, maybe by massaging the front of your hip and sighing the breath out. And then rolling the leg from the hip inwards and outwards. Is it helpful to breathe out at a certain point? It might feel helpful to breathe out on the releasing back or on the effort of rolling in. So notice how that feels. And relaxing the leg again, breathing out, and then sliding the heel in. And then bringing the knee to above the hip. Finding the balance, so again, really letting the thigh drop. If you can reach, you can just slightly encourage your thigh to slot into the hip to release onto the ball. And then guiding with your hand if you wish, or just using the thigh muscles to control this. Letting your knee go slightly inwards and outwards, keeping the pelvis very stable. So there will be a slight feeling of rocking out towards the left side. Not much though, so really keep it quite controlled, small movement. Keeping the pelvis heavy. So there's like a kind of counterbalancing happening on the hip that we're keeping still, counterweight. And then when you bring your knee next above your hip, see how it is to straighten the leg to some extent, maybe not all the way. Bend and straighten a few times, move or remove the ball anytime it feels like it's in a painful or uncomfortable place. Keeping the leg raised up, pointing the toes away from you and in towards you a few times. Keeping the weight of your leg dropping down through the hip. And then bending the knee, hugging the knee in towards you. And then bringing the foot back down. And then if you've only got one ball, removing it so that your pelvis becomes level on the floor. If you've got two balls, actually take them away for a moment as well, so you can have that sense of coming back to the floor. And then if you've got two balls, placing both of them underneath you again, maybe in a slightly different place. If you've got one and it's not too hard, you could have some extra padding between the ball and your body. If you've got one, place it under the sacrum, the center of your pelvis, the bone between your tailbone and your spine. It's a triangular bone, kind of mirrors the pubic bone on the back of the body. So two balls or one ball in the middle. And again, settling down. Breathing out, releasing. And then bringing one knee in towards you. So there's a little bit of a wobble going on probably if you've got one ball, and you might realize, oh, it's not in quite the best place. There's a little effort going on in balancing. Finding a way to stabilize your body as well through your arms. So you can anchor your arms out to the side or your elbows out to the side. And then seeing if you can let the other knee come up as well. So there's going to be more weight through the ball. So if it's too much, then remove it. It's easier with two balls. And then bringing the first leg back down. Sighing again. When we've got a foot on the floor, we're a bit more supported. And then changing over again slowly so you stay balanced. This is building gentle control through the core. If you've been using 2 balls and you're curious about 1 ball, you could change over. Of course, again, doing this without a ball underneath you is just as valid. A little easier and still really interesting and useful. And then bringing both feet back to the floor. Again, maybe shifting the ball or balls if the pressure is becoming uncomfortable. And then seeing how it is to straighten both legs out. So this is creating a slight back bend, elevation through the back of the hips. Now this one you could also do with a yoga block or a cushion under your hips or a rolled up blanket. So passive psoas stretch. So maybe feeling a bit of a stretch along the front of the hips. If it's not comfortable, you can return to having 1 knee bent and 1 leg straight. And in that case, you're stretching one side of the psoas at a time. You can let your arms relax any way they like. Breathing out, relaxing, letting the weight of the pelvis be heavy. If you're releasing one side, in other words, you've got 1 knee bent and 1 leg straight, then switch over now. Psoas muscle, hip flexor tightness here might translate into this feeling a little bit compressing in your lower back, a little achy. So that's when I recommend just doing 1 leg straight and 1 knee bent. Lovely. And then you can either slide both legs back at the same time or one at a time. Lift up into a mini bridge, tucking your tailbone under a little bit so you're contracting the buttock area. And then removing the ball or balls and then rolling back down. Feeling the connection with the ground. And then at this point, it's probably really nice to bring your knees in, to give them a little hug, to let your lower back really hug the ground. So going into hip flexion, we were in hip extension. Moving your head a little from side to side. And then letting your knees rock, move from side to side, so your pelvis rocks from side to side. And you can keep the head rolling too, in the opposite direction of the knees. So a gentle spinal twist. And then coming back to the center. And taking a little rest. And so either with your knees bent or with your legs straight. Breathing out fully. Noticing how your back feels, your spine. And if anything has changed there for you. And this is a nice preparation for back bending poses in yoga, as well as really helpful for people who have tight hip flexors, stiff muscles at the front of the hips, or having kind of some aches in your lower back. Proceed with caution. So if you get that compression in your lower back, always do less and use the modifications offered.